Hello, this is News for Scotland. It's Wednesday, the 1st of May. I'm Hugh Stewart, this is Jeanette Hill. And this is the week of the Vonk, Jeanette. That's a new word, or a new acronym which just entered the Scottish political dictionary this week. The Vonk is the vote of no confidence. I thought it was a motion of no confidence. That would have been a monk. Anyway, we had not one but two Vonks this week. And as we're recording this show, which is on Wednesday afternoon, the second of those Vonks has just collapsed. So right at the start of this week, Douglas Ross of the Conservatives had raised a Vonk against Humza Yousaf, but he dropped that the other day, and he claims his job done. He says that he's responsible for Humza Yousaf resigning. So Douglas Ross removed his Vonk from the parliamentary proceedings. However, Anas Sarwar also had a Vonk, and that was against the entire Scottish Government. Now, we just heard shortly before we started doing today's show, that vote has just been voted down in the Scottish Parliament. So with the support of the Scottish Greens, the Scottish Government continues, so we're not going to have a summer election in Scotland. There will, of course, be a UK election at some point. We'll be discussing the opinion polls on that later on. So the Greens have, in fact, backed the Scottish Government, and that's a bit odd because they were all for sacking Humza Yousaf, but they did not vote for sacking the Scottish Government, which Humza Yousaf is still leading at the moment. Today, as we speak, Humza Yousaf still is the First Minister. Oh well, that's politics. So no summer election, and both of the votes of no confidence have been defeated, and the Scottish Government carries on. So Jeanette, that leads us to the question of who is going to replace Humza Yousaf, and we don't know. As of Wednesday, nobody has come forward. Now, incidentally, we've just been listening to the speeches, and we'll put the speeches in the Scottish Parliament onto our YouTube page later on. And one of the points that Douglas Ross was making for the Scottish Conservatives is that it's striking that nobody has come forward from the SNP. He's saying, does nobody want the job? Is it too much of a poison chalice, is really what he's suggesting. But however, at the moment, everyone is talking about Kate Forbes or John Swinney, because they have both said publicly that they are thinking about it. But we haven't heard anyone else announced, so they've not formally announced yet. But who would be the most popular leader? Now, Yvonne Alexis, who's not with us today, has, however, been looking at the opinion polls. So this is Yvonne's story, that Scottish voters believe that Kate Forbes would make a better First Minister than John Swinney. And that's according to new polling by Ipsos, just out. Swinney is, however, the favourite among SNP voters, with nearly a third of those who backed the party in 2021 saying that he would be the best choice. The Ipsos polling was conducted on the 29th and 30th of April, and it did find that Swinney and Forbes are neck and neck on how voters think they would perform as First Minister. Around 37% believe the former Deputy FM, Swinney, would do a good job, while 23% say he would do a bad job. That's a lead of 14, if you like. That compares to 37% saying that the former Finance Secretary Forbes would do a good job, and 24% saying a bad job. So that's about that's 13%, I think. So they're more or less neck and neck there. But when asked to say who would be the best First Minister out of a list of possible contenders, over one quarter, at 26%, favoured Kate Forbes against 20%, a fifth favouring John Swinney. So it looks like Swinney would probably be the favourite among the SNP loyalists and SNP voters, but not necessarily the favourite among the voters when it comes to the election. Among SNP voters, you see 30% favoured Swinney and only 20% backed Forbes. Emily Gray, the Managing Director of Ipsos in Scotland, said the SNP will be looking to select a leader who can unite the party, secure cooperation from opposition parties so that laws and budgets can actually be passed, and also reverse the party's slide in the polls. She said, while Swinney may be better placed than Forbes to address the first of these two, that's to say uniting the Parliament, on the third point, the evidence suggests that Forbes may have wider appeal among the electorate than John Swinney does. Both contenders, however, outperformed Labour's leader Anas Sarwar, who's on 31%, thinking he'd do a good job, and Douglas Ross for the Conservatives, over half thought he would do a bad job. But I don't think he's going to get that opportunity. Nearly 2/3, nearly 2 in 5, 39%, said that a Labour-led Scottish Government would do a better job than the current SNP government. But over half, that's 55%, of Republic said that a Conservative-led administration would do a worse job than the Scottish Government. So once again, in Scotland, it's really about the SNP v Labour. The polling also revealed that the public was split on whether Yousaf's decision to end the Butte House agreement last week was the correct decision. It's about 45% either way. SNP voters, not surprisingly, were more likely to say it was the wrong decision, and I'm sure the Green voters would be also. The nomination period for the SNP's leadership opened Monday a couple of days ago. Candidates need to secure the support of 100 party members, at least from 20 different branches, to make it onto the ballot paper. So next week we'll know who is standing if anyone wants the job. Right, Jeanette, reading more from me. You've got some stories later on. I've also been looking at a story which has been reported in the Fraser-Varner Institute's economic reports just a couple of days ago. The question is, are Scottish taxes driving people south? We often hear from Conservatives, don't we, that the Scottish economy is being strangled. It's been held back by high taxes. All the bright people, all the people with initiative and drive will be heading down the M6 as fast as they could rather than pay Scotland's taxes. So is that true? Now, let's leave aside for two important points. First of all, that taxes are not devolved except income tax. There's loads of taxes we pay. VAT is the next big one. The Scottish Government doesn't have any influence on any of the other taxes, I think, apart from airport landing tax. So really, if the Scottish Government wants to raise more revenue, income tax is the only one it's got. So they've only got that one club in the bag, if you like. And the second point we shouldn't forget is the value for money you get for paying taxes in Scotland. You get free prescription charges, you get better health and social care on the south of the border, and you get free university tuition. So I would say to any high achiever thinking of moving south, I would say, haven't you got kids that want to go to university? Can you do arithmetic, right? How much tax are you going to pay? And what sort of debt are your student kids going to be in after 4 years of university in England? So, you have to balance it up. Now, so let's look at the figures, Jeanette. So since the Scottish Government brought in its more progressive tax bands, and particularly since they started putting up the income tax, have people been moving away from Scotland? Well, interestingly, we have some statistics on that from the Revenue and Customs UK. They conducted research over a period of about 10 years up to 2022, and they're looking at people moving in and out the different regions of the UK, from different regions of England, from England to Wales, and from England to Scotland, and vice versa. Of course, every year, thousands of people move north and thousands of people move south. But guess what? The figures are there are more people coming to Scotland than leaving.
Yeah.
I should emphasise that this study only goes up to 2022. Now, you might say that doesn't include last year's tax increase, but it does include the period since the Scottish Government brought in its more progressive tax bans. And in that period, people have not been in the slightest inhibited from coming to Scotland. In fact, the numbers have increased. Really, at the end of that period, up to 2022, the period before then, 4 or 5 years, there's been an increase in the number of people, the net flow of people moving to Scotland. Now, incidentally, I don't know why, but the same goes for Wales. More people have been moving to Wales. It's possible there was a COVID effect. I don't know whether people decided to move out of the cities and move into the fresh air of the countryside. We don't know. The report doesn't say exactly where they went to, so we can speculate. But people are not leaving Scotland. People are coming here. There's a bit more to say on that, though. Sorry, you're getting bored. I'll just finish this very soon. So the HMRC also followed the money. Instead of just asking how many people flitted in and out of the country, they also asked how much revenue was the Scottish Government gaining or losing. Now, for example, in 2029, the Revenue and Customs think that the Scottish Government probably lost about 60 million because some of the people who moved south would have been high income earners, therefore higher taxpayers. So there has been a flow of money out of Scotland, if you like, not reversing the flow of people moving in. But people are still moving to Scotland, presumably because they think, in spite of our progressive tax system, that it's still a good place to live. All right, just before I move on, there's a caveat that a lot more research needs to be done. But that's what we know. People are not rushing south of the border because we pay for our social services here. Okay, now, do you want another story for me? Have you got one?
Yeah, no, you go.
All right, now, this period about now happens to be a European anniversary. I don't know if you know this, but it's 10 years since the so-called Big Bang. That's the period when all of those ex-Soviet countries, Poland, Hungary, etc., were all admitted as full members of the European Union. So that big expansion, that's the biggest expansion we've ever seen of the European Union, was 10 years ago, 2004. Now, yesterday, European Council President Charles Michel said that it's just as well they came over to the west side when you look at Putin's war in Ukraine. If they'd still been in the east, there would now be an iron curtain and all those countries would be separated from us and they'd be under pressure to support Putin and the war effort. So they have joined the European Union 10 years ago, and good thing too, says Michel. He went on to say that enlargement is vital for the future of the EU. Now, 9 countries on the eastern part of Europe, Moldova and, of course, Ukraine, are now queuing up to join the EU. And that idea of joining the EU is also very popular in Scotland, who, of course, voted to stay in the EU. Incidentally, I think it's very popular in England now as well, although not among the Labour. It is, isn't it? If you ask the English people now, was Brexit a good idea? No, very few people think it was. However, Keir Starmer's not convinced. The EU elections, incidentally, for the Strasbourg Parliament and for the Commission President are now just over a month away at the start of June. The last time Scotland had 6 MEPs elected, there were 3 from the SNP, 1 Conservative, 1 Labour, and 1, strangely, for the Brexit Party. They were all sent home on the 31st of January 2019, when Scotland was removed from the EU because of the Leave vote in Britain. Now, we've got a quick story here on green jobs growing. We hear a lot about the transition away from the old polluting economies to the new economy. It's all about jobs. Now, Scottish Renewables, incidentally, have just this week published a survey of companies working in the supply chain, providing equipment for the growing sector of alternative energy, particularly wind. And the report out now shows that firms are taking on more workers. In fact, 90% of the firms studied in this Scottish Renewables report have actually employed more people in the last 12 months. One firm, for example, SD Wind and Energy in Ayrshire, is now recruiting. They've got an advert out now. They want factory workers for their plant in East Ayrshire. Emma Harrick, speaking for Scottish Renewables, said that while the whole industry supports 42,000 jobs, it's worth 10 billion to, I think she said the UK economy. She didn't specify, but I think it's 10 billion for the whole of UK. But she also says that the survey indicates that all firms in the renewables sector are confident about the future and believe that Scotland is an attractive place to invest. Okay, now, Jeanette, do you want to know where my band is playing in July?
Yes, please.
Well, as it happens, we've got a gig in Arden, in the beautiful island of Arden. I've not been there for a while. Now, this is about the Arden ferry crisis. No, it's not that crisis. I'm referring to the harbour. I booked my trip to Arden the other day, and it says I'm going from Ardrossan to Brodick, but I don't think I am. I think I'm going from Troon to Brodick. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. If you know, please tell us. But the ticket says Ardrossan, but there's a problem with the harbour at Ardrossan. Now, it's not in a safe condition. So who's to blame for that? Is it CalMac? Is it another Scottish Government disaster? Will we blame Humza Yousaf, or will we blame the Transport Secretary, Fiona Hislop? Well, I've had a look at Professor John Robertson's Talking Up Scotland blog today, and in fact he says we should blame the harbour operator, a private company called Peel Ports. Now, Duncan Mackinson of CalMac said the facilities at Ardrossan have not been maintained to an adequate standard, and he added that the berths continue to deteriorate due to lack of investment. This is in spite of the fees paid to Peel Port by CalMac, which altogether now total $15.5 billion, and that's of our money. Where does all this money go? Well, the Prof asked that question. John Whittaker, he thinks, must have some of it. Who's he? John Whittaker is a British billionaire and the chairman of the Peel Group, which also runs many transport sites across England. And he's a very busy chap, Mr. Whittaker. He's the director of 312 companies, and they mainly have assets in harbours and airports across England, particularly the North West. In 2014, a UK parliamentary inquiry led by Margaret Hodges found that a whole collection of firms were not paying enough tax. She didn't think they were paying their fair share at all, although the confusing company structure makes it difficult to see where the profits are. But that's what they think. So CalMac is owned by the Scottish Government. Should we own the harbours too? Okay, that's my quick news story. So, Jeanette, what have you got for our listeners and viewers this week?
I've got a little bit on the Gaza protest, which was on Saturday the 27th in Glasgow. And there was an eerie calm descended on Glasgow's busiest shopping street last Saturday afternoon as thousands of protesters walked in silence to mark 200 days since the start of the Israeli invasion of Gaza. The organisers had requested that instead of the usual music and drums and singing and things, protesters should be silent to represent the silenced cries for justice, is what the organisers said. Some protesters held up their hands, painted red, to represent the bloodshed that was taking place over the last 200 days. And one observer, Francis Lang, noted on Facebook that people passing by stopped their conversations, stopped and stood with their heads down as the Glasgow March passed by. Now, this event took place in the context of marches that were similar in Edinburgh, in Dundee, in Aberdeen, in London, and of course the protests on the American university campuses. In the light of that, we've seen some new funding for Ukraine and for Gaza. So many followers of News of Scotland will have noticed that on the 20th of April, the US House of Representatives approved $95 billion of funding for allies, including $61 billion for Ukraine, $26 billion for Israel, and $8 billion for the Indo-Pacific, including Taiwan. The British government has also chipped in $500 million for Ukraine. A Ministry of Defence tweet boasted that this will provide 60 boats, 1,600 munitions, including missiles, 400 vehicles and 4 million rounds of ammunition. Some followers of News of Scotland may have asked, where does all this money come from? Given that there's never enough money to train more doctors or to pay for pensions, or to pay out compensation for all the other people that we've got, the people that had infected blood products, the people that are waiting for their pension, the people who are waiting for their payouts because of the post office scandal, all of this. But we seem to have money for this. So that's because a government that issues its own currency, that's Westminster, not Scotland, can pay for anything it wants in its own currency. It is therefore a political choice as to what is funded and what's not. And from the choices the government makes, we can see what their priorities are.
That's one of the points that's been debated frequently in the SNP, because the majority of the membership would like to see a Scottish Central Bank set up early as one of the first things. An independent Scotland would do. Whereas, of course, and this is Humza's position as well, Humza Yousaf and the outgoing government had a much more gradual idea. We'll share the pound for a number of years. I think they were talking about 10 years or something like that. But as you say, Jeanette, if you're sharing somebody else's currency, you can't borrow in that currency. Or you can't issue it, rather. You could borrow, but you have to pay somebody else back in somebody else's currency, and that's expensive, whereas issuing your own currency is a completely different idea. Okay, anything else you want to look at now before we discuss those items?
Oh, yeah, there is one more story. Have you not got another story? No?
No, I'm out.
Okay. Mom, just let me.
Right, well, listen, while you're looking for that, I'll just point out that as we arrived in the studio today, Jeanette and I, we were listening, in fact, to the debate in Holyrood. Humza, I thought, Humza Yousaf made a really good speech. His outgoing speech, I thought, sounded really excellent. It was fighting, fighting talk. And he made the point of stressing what the Scottish Government has achieved. He talked about lifting 100,000 children out of poverty. He talked about better levels of health and social care in Scotland than in other parts of the UK. So he gave a long list of items that he's proud of. Now, I haven't written them all down. What we should do is, for you, is we'll put them onto our YouTube if I can get them edited. So I'll try and do that fairly soon. And you can have a look at that. They're all on Scottish Parliament TV, but if you haven't got the time to look through that, we'll see if we can get some excerpts of the main speeches, and we'll get that up on the YouTube channel soon. Okay, have you found that story?
I've got just a little bit really about, because I thought it was interesting. I was reading through the Hacked Off website. Hacked Off's the organisation that partially formed by Hugh Grant, not just him. He's one of the founding fathers of it, I suppose. So it's sort of long been accepted that in Scotland, the influence of the mainstream media, including the Scottish Sun and the Scottish Daily Mail, as well as TV channels, etc., and people thought they definitely affected their voting behaviour in the referendum. And so they're asking right now, some of these papers are asking, or some other journalists are asking, will they back Starmer? And a recent poll found that readers in The Sun are most likely, or the most likely in those two, to back Labour. 4 out of 10 of them, it says, casting a vote for Starmer in the next election. This compares to, I think it's like 33% of the Daily Mail. Most of them still lean towards the Conservatives, even now. The Conservative press, of course, has historically been no friend of Labour leaders. You know, we certainly can remember the things that they did to Corbyn in 2019 general election, I think it was. The Sun labelled Corbyn the most dangerous man ever to stand for high office in Britain. Really? And strangely, I read recently that the Daily Mail was very similar to Nye Bevan, was saying exactly the same about him in the early 40s. He was a very dangerous man, according to them. Although in 1997, The Sun actually backs Blair. Do you remember that headline?
Yep.
That was shocking. Yep. And of course, SNP former leaders did have some backing for those publications early on, well before the referendum was on its way. So Hugh Grant's latest court case was resolved out of court because of some sort of legal jiggery-pokery sort of made it that even if he had won 10 million, if he didn't win exactly that amount, he would have to pay the Sun's legal fees, which could be an awful lot of money, and he knew it. Even though he openly says it, they openly, illegally, or they obtained his medical records when under deception, if you like, false pretenses. They burglarised his office. He says it outright there. This is him saying it. They tapped his phone, so he's out there saying it in the hope that the Sun will take him, obviously, to court over it, because he wants it out there that they did all this horrific illegal stuff, bribed police officers, according to him. There was a whole load of stuff that's not just about freedom of speech, is what he's trying to say, of, freedom of the press. In fact, he's challenging this to say we have no free press. And one of the things that Hacktoff says is Britain deserves a free press. We need it, really, yeah. And when we think who owns the press, billionaire-owned, non-domiciliary, extremely right-wing views, and very few people. So do have a look, folks, at the Hacktoff campaign. I think it's interesting to look at, and it's asking for a free and accountable press. That's what we think we are, isn't it, Hugh?
We want to be able to say whatever we think is going on. We want to be able to report the news without anyone threatening. We haven't been threatened, but people in the past have been threatened by libel actions. But British people do use lawyers to say, if you say that again, we're going to see you in court. Now, you might have a good case, but as you said, Jeanette, the thing is, the process is a punishment. If you have to defend a case in court, it's going to cost you thousands.
A lot of money. And in the Hacktoff, it actually talks about how much influence these tiny amount of mainstream media, tiny amount of billionaire-owned mainstream media has on government. And that's one of the things they're talking about, they've got out there. It's government transparency sort of stuff they've got out there. 532 meetings recorded between these top press and the government. 218 of those interactions were recorded between Murdoch and the government. Rupert Murdoch personally met the government representatives 12 times over a 6-month period. You're looking at unbelievable amounts of influence that they have over the government. That's why the governments or parties are very interested in if these publications will back them up or not. It's because of the massive influence that they have.
Well, of course, Blair was famous for actually courting Murdoch at that time. It wasn't an accident that his papers called for Labour. They had been preparing the ground for a long time.
That's it. Private calls between the Secretary of State and newspaper editors to draft a media bill, to looking at the Levinson plans, sort of things like that. And people sometimes say, but they're dying out. People aren't buying the Sun the same as they used to, or the Daily Mail, same as they used to. And that's true for the newspaper versions. But actually, when you look at their online presence, it still very dominates the industry. It really does. And yes, they are losing some advertising, but they're still making enough. I would say they're still making a lot. Yeah, and we have seen an 8% drop in circulation of the newspapers, the Scottish versions of the Mail and the Sun. But we've seen an uptake in subscriptions to the online varieties. Yeah, so people are subscribing to these instead of News for Scotland. What's wrong with them?
We are, of course, part of the new media, is the phrase that people use, or the digital media. Now, on the question of newspapers declining, the papers have almost disappeared. If you look at the circulation of back in the old days when you talked about the Sun back in Blair, they used to sell literally millions every day, didn't they?
The paper copies, that's it. But now we've got the
now it's a few thousand. So, but the thing that annoys me about the old media, the tree media, is that there's two things that really annoy me about the paper media. I don't know if you share this. First of all, they're always on the stand. Whenever you go into a supermarket, there's always a row of about eight so in newspapers, and they're usually conservatives, and except one, they're all unionists, and they're always screaming the headlines at you all day. Now, the reason the headlines are there all day is because nobody's buying them. The papers just sit there on the stand.
But that's the point I'm making. People we think in Scotland, they're dying out. Like the Sun, it has died out in Liverpool, but actually they've got huge, growing online presence. So I'm sort of trying to say to our listeners, look at other things. We have a new emerging media in Scotland. If you got to click on something, try to click on something else rather than the Sun and the Daily Mail. If we want to eliminate this, maybe we don't want to, but if you want to sort of bring down their presence and their opinions in Scotland, then we've got to stop clicking on them.
Well, absolutely. And the other point I was going to make about the old media, the dead media,
it's not dead. That's the problem.
Well, they could have transferred to digital, but should we still talk about what the papers say? The BBC and I don't know the others, they still. On radio and TV, they tend to take their news from the newspapers. And they tend to say, well, if the newspapers have gone on a story, then the BBC will go on that story as well. Now, we don't. We look at what we think's interesting, and we hope you agree that it's interesting. But we're not going to run a story just because BBC did it, or just because the Guardian did it even. We'll run stories that we think are of interest to our listeners, but they always do of what the papers say. So maybe we should do of what the media says, and maybe if you're watching us, then you've probably been looking for new media. And I'm thinking one of these days we should do a roundup of not what the papers say, but what
the other media,
does the digital media say, because there's dozens of sites I'm sure you could suggest which are well worth paying attention to. So we'll maybe do a roundup of that over the next couple of weeks.
And given the influence that these papers have had on our politics, then really it is important that we think before we click.
Absolutely. That's a good phrase, that. Right, talking about media, were you going to discuss the STV journalists?
Oh, yes, they're having
what have you got on that?
Yeah, they're having a excuse me, they're having a strike today, and they won't be covering all them. It's a big news day for Scotland, but they won't be covering it, and we won't have. Excuse me. On you go, Hugh.
And it's basically about wages, isn't it?
Yes, it is really. Yeah.
The National Union of Journalists is saying that the STV is actually making money. They could easily afford it, and they've suggested one source of money is look at the chief executive's take-home pay. He's doing okay, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Simon Pitts, is it? Yeah, I believe it's Simon Pitts.
I know.
He's making a lot of money and a huge profit. He's got a huge bonus, and that's what it is, huge bonus. And the NUG says, take his bonus away from him, and that could pay for the 90 journalists, I think it is, they're asking for. I mean, there's start pay is less than a start pay for a teacher, isn't they're not asking for loads of money. Well, whatever we think of STV.
Well, actually, I'm quite pleased that the STV News is. Well, it's interesting. STV News is getting more viewers than the BBC, although they've got something like a tenth of the budget. So I'm delighted. The STV. I know some people work for STV, so I'm very pleased that they're doing that. Is that old media, or are they? Well, also, I tend to look at them on their website anyway.
But I do think the journalists, the young journalists particularly, they've got a good case, for their pay rise.
I mean, these days journalists are multi-skilled too, because in this very place we're recording in the Glasgow Caledonian, and journalists here, they have to learn not only the old traditional skills of journalism,
All
which
the
means
new ones.
reporting who, what, where, when. And I don't know if they still do shorthand. I did meet some journalists the other day from the Daily Mail. That's very clever, very impressive. But journalists today, anyway, have to be able to do what we're doing, have to be able to record, then edit and upload digitally. They have to be able to do all that on the move. They're highly skilled people.
Yeah,
They deserve the money.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, and any other news before we discuss some of today's big
We
stories?
interviewed the Macker, the Scots
Oh, yeah, I forgot
Macker.
about the Macker. Now, can I just remind you, in case you've forgotten, because we did a story on the new Galloway Macker on our podcast edition. That went out something like last November. And the story is that the story, in case you missed that one, there's Mackers been going around the country looking at different languages. For instance, there was a Macker a few years ago in the Northern Isles, I think it was Orkney, and also the language in Doric in Aberdeen, of course, is completely different to the part of Scotland where we're from. And so the Macker at the moment, whom you've been talking to, is representing Dumfries and Galloway, and it's to
Scots
emphasise
language,
the
yeah.
specific type of Scots found in the southwest. So who is she again?
She's Susie Briggs. Yeah, amazing, fabulous lady. So we've got an interview with her and lots of little poems that she's given us, and we're going to put them out on our YouTube channel. And she's just about to launch this thing called We Podcast, which she showed me a little bit of it. It's absolutely fabulous. Stories for children in Scots, really, in Scots language. Yeah, fabulous.
Okay, so we can link to that. I'm sure you know how to do it. We can link to that off the Facebook page. You do that. I'll link to it off. I'll see if I can do that off the YouTube. So that's so she's mainly raising. She's talking to kids and to her local community groups in Dumfries and Galloway, and she's raising the idea of this distinctive type of Scots.
Yeah, that's it.
Found there, writing in that tone. Okay. That's our top stories, is it, for today?
Yes, I
So we'll
think
just
so, yeah.
spend a few minutes of your time discussing that, some of them anyway. Now, as I said just before we came into the studio, I heard Humza Yousaf's outgoing speech, I suppose, as First Minister, because it was his task today to reply to the VONC, to reply to the motion of no confidence from Anna Sarwar. And we will put that whole speech on our YouTube later on, although you might see it before this show goes out, actually, because it takes us a while to edit these things, but that will be on the YouTube. And he made a big list of the things he's achieved. He said that government's about choices, and he said that he was replying to Anna Sarwar, and we've made different choices to Labour. For example, he said Labour have chosen to drop their earlier commitment on climate change.
Yeah.
Labour nationally, I remember about a year or so ago, they said, once you elect a Labour government, we will spend 28 billion on climate change projects. That was dropped a long time ago. He also criticised Labour for supporting taking away the cap on top people's salaries, on bankers' salaries, while maintaining the cap on benefits. So saying that's a choice that Labour made. You didn't have to make that choice. And he emphasised time and time again, we in Scotland have made different choices. So he's fighting back at Anna Sarwar's motion of no confidence by saying that, these are the choices we've made tonight, and voters who are thinking of going to Labour will have to ask themselves if Labour's choices are the choices of voters. So obviously he's fighting back against the motion of no confidence, but he's also looking ahead to re-election. So we're not going to have a Scottish election, but there will have to be a UK election sometime. I think I know when. Well, what do you think of that before I tell you?
I don't know. I haven't got a clue. Do you think it's going to be summer?
Well, I have a feeling. Now, this is just my opinion about it. I haven't got any inside information. Nobody on Twitter has given me a tip-off, but I think it'll be July, and I'll tell you why. It's because Rishi Sunak's Rwanda campaign has just had its first success. Have you heard of this? It turned out in the news yesterday that some bloke has gone to Rwanda. One guy went to Rwanda with 3,000 quid in his pocket. So Sunak will say it's working. And also the UK government says they have now actually booked a plane. And so that's why Sunak will say. He also said the other day, this month and next month, people will start to see those tax cuts appearing in their wage packet. And they've got people in the plane to Rwanda.
Yeah. Well, I did see something on Facebook which kind of made me snigger, but it was quite sad, saying that we've built more social housing in Rwanda than we have here.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I saw that one.
Sunak has anyway, not Scottish Government.
But that's why I think Sunak will go in July, because the rest of the rest of the news for Sunak is going to be bad and then worse. Right? Obviously, the boats will continue coming over the summer. The economy is not picking up, whatever he says it is. So that's why, if I were a betting man, I think I'd put a few quid on a general election in July, right? But don't take my word for that. That's just my opinion, right? I'm not giving you any inside information. He hasn't told me, right? Now, okay, so let me ask you what's your opinion on some of the points that were raised in Parliament today? Now, Douglas Ross played on the word confidence. This was a no confidence motion. And he said something like, not only do I have no confidence in the Scottish Government, but he says the SNP don't even have confidence in themselves, because none of them have come forward to take the job. Isn't it a bit odd that the resignation was on Monday, and still on Wednesday we still don't know who wants to take over as Scotland's First Minister?
I'm not sure. I mean, is it a procedure? Have they got to go through some sort of procedure first when they jump in? Is it?
Yeah, but the first thing you have to do is to declare yourself as a candidate.
Yeah.
Right? So nobody's even said that up to today, both Swinney and Forbes have said they're thinking about it, actively thinking about it, seriously thinking about it, but neither of them has actually said, yes, I want to do it. Now, that just raises in my head the question of whether the SNP itself, because of we won't go into this in detail, but there are some financial issues and some legal issues facing the SNP. And so maybe a lot of people are thinking, I would rather go for this next year. I don't think this is the year when I want to be in charge with all of this chaos going around me. That's just a
difficult year to take charge of it. Yeah, I can see it could be. Who knows?
So maybe there might be only one candidate. Maybe John Swinney will be persuaded once again, because he's been Deputy First Minister and he's been leader of the SNP before, so maybe he'll be persuaded to be a caretaker. Is that what the SNP needs at this time? With there is a Scottish election in 2 years' time.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, well, we'll see. We'll see again if anybody else comes forward for it. Now, the other question I wanted to discuss with you is based on Patrick Harvey's speech today in Parliament. He said that what he demands of the new First Minister is somebody who sticks to climate change, of course. He emphasised, obviously, the green sustainability agenda, that the Greens will support anyone who makes sure that climate change is a priority. But he also said, I want the next government to be progressive in social matters. Now, what he's referring to here, of course, is things like the GRR and the debates that there have been around the CAS report and withdrawing puberty blockers from any more young patients. So the Greens do not support that. The Greens are very dismissive of the CAS report, and a lot of Greens are actually angry about the withdrawal of the puberty blockers prescription. So is that what they mean by progressive?
I don't know if you can say it, because he didn't openly, he was asked, didn't he, by Ash Regan to openly, Patrick Harvey, to accept the CAS report. But can you say a lot of Green? I don't know if we can say that. That's maybe a generalisation there here.
Well, he didn't say that exact language, but he keeps emphasising progressive. I want people to support progressive policies. Well, so I'm thinking...
And you're guessing that's what you think.
Okay, I'm guessing. Okay, right. So I just think people should say what they mean. I think that's what he means. Okay, well, what do you think? Right. We in News of Scotland, we don't agree on everything. We generally are on the same page, or otherwise we probably wouldn't be running a show together. But we want to know what you think. It's about it's about a debate. It's about what do we do with our country.
Aye, absolutely.
So I'm also wondering, you see, whether the Greens are really shooting a warning shot across the SNP to say, when we talk about progressive, we're not talking about Kate Forbes.
No, that she's not popular.
Known as a socially conservative. She is. She is a wee free member. She, of course, never made any bones about that. The Greens, I know a lot of Greens have actually said, how can we have a First Minister, somebody who voted against gay marriage? She did. So there's no doubt about it. She's socially conservative. So when Patrick Harvey says, I want somebody progressive, he wasn't thinking about somebody from the Wee Frees, was he?
No, that's very true. Although, can we just say, historically, the Wee Frees were the only ones who supported people in the decampment of the Highlands and the Islands. There was the only church who supported people there. So they have had a history of social awareness, social movement forward. Maybe not these days. Maybe.
Yeah, there will be radical initiatives that they support. And
They have it. They have some.
again, I'm just raising this point. Incidentally, I must just remind you that Kate Forbes has said, although she wouldn't have voted for certain things, that doesn't mean that she's going to stand against it. She certainly has no intention of raising any bill against gay marriage. She's not going to do that, right?
She just means it's a personal choice. Yeah. Which is, your point is right. Yeah, it still stands. Yeah.
Okay, but again, as usual, these are issues that we'd like to people to debate on. We've only recently started doing the YouTube version. You may have heard us before on podcast. The audio version still goes out. And it's interesting, of course, to get comments underneath the YouTube edition. So one or two people have had some things to say. And just wee comments here and there. We'd like to hear a bit more, actually. If you take the trouble to comment, just say a bit more, please, about what you think, what you agree with, and what you disagree with. We'll be very pleased to hear from you.
Or indeed debate on the Facebook page.
Okay, Jeanette runs a Facebook page. Now, let me see. I think that's about it just now. We've decided, I hope you agree, decide to try and keep the shows a bit shorter. And that's another thing, by the way. Do you want the shows to be half an hour, 20 minutes, or 3 hours? Jeanette and I could easily do 3 hours. No problem.
No, please no. And we'll probably be doing a few wee documentaries, maybe specifically on certain subjects. Short ones, 10, 15-minute ones.
Yep, so probably once a month, as well as the regular news every week, we'll be doing something special. Well, in fact, we've got a thing in mind. We might as well see what it is. Yeah,
Cult shows, but hopefully.
The home of John McLean and the South
indeed,
Side.
Absolutely.
We're going to do a bit about the history, and also we'll look at what's happening in Portshores, that historic part of Glasgow.
And how amazing they are right now, the Borough Hulks, about all the things that they do for the community now. Yeah, how important they are now.
So we're preparing that. I'm not sure when that'll be out. We'll try and get that out before the end of May. We're trying to do a special once a month, and I don't know what we're going to do in June. You tell us, what do you think we should do a special on?
Yeah. I quite like the idea of the community food networks, because they're absolutely amazing what we do.
I don't know anything about that. One of the things I enjoy about doing this with you, Jeanette, is you get to find out things, If there's something I don't know about, go and research it and have a word with some people, then we end up better informed, as you do, I hope. Okay, well, we'll just tie it up then. So that's it. This show, remember, was recorded on the 1st of May, so it looks like we're definitely not going to have a Scottish election. The audio version will go out on about Thursday or Friday. This is probably going to go out Thursday or Friday as well.
Yep.
If you look on our YouTube channel, and you can search for it, well, you found it already, but if you listen to the audio one, the YouTube is on @News for Scotland, all one word, on YouTube. And we're also putting up some wee short episodes. A YouTube short is just anything less than 60 seconds. And Jeanette recorded some a while ago, which are probably going to go up over the next couple of days. So there's going to be a lot of stuff on YouTube. Some of it's shorts, and some of it are these longer things. So if you are watching them, do us a favour, please. It really does help us if you like and subscribe to the channel. It makes a big difference to us, actually. We do need to get a number of subscribers up. For various reasons, well, for money, really.
And since it is May Day, happy May Day, that's today, Wednesday, the 1st of May.
Of course, it's Workers' Day. So with that, I think we'll sign off. So from me, Hugh Stewart.
Okay.
And from Jeanette Hill, thanks for watching or listening, and we'll be back next week. Bye.
Thank you.